Hey babe, welcome to Baseball for Girls, where baseball meets soft girl energy. I'm Shaughnessy, and here we do baseball with heart, humanity, and a little humor. So, whether you're brand new to the game or deep in your baseball era, you're in the right place. So grab something cozy, settle in, and let's get into today's episode. Let's play ball. Hey babes, welcome back to another episode of Baseball for Girls. Today I have another weekly recap for you guys. So it'll be a recap for the week of August 17th through August 23rd. So last week was a really fun week, I feel like, in baseball. There were a lot of sweeps. So a lot of teams won all of the games in their series. There were a couple of blowouts. So a blowout is when one team just outscores the other team by an insurmountable amount. So that is definitely our vocab word of the week, blowout. An example of this is last Tuesday, the Mariners were playing their 3-game series against the Milwaukee Brewers. The Brewers won the first game of that series 22-0. So that is definitely what we would consider to be a blowout kind of game. Sometimes this is also referred to as a laugher. So it's just a game where one team is outscoring the other and that team just has no real chance of ever coming back in that game. Sometimes in a blowout, you'll see a position player come up and be a pitcher, especially in the last couple of innings. So that just means that a player that is not typically a pitcher, so a player that is typically in the outfield or the infield or even just on the bench for that game, they will come up and pitch for the rest of the game just because there's no reason to keep using pitchers when the game is very clearly lost. So in that game where the Brewers won 22-0, the Mariners did end up bringing in a position player so that they could save the arms of their actual pitchers for the next day. Luckily, the Brewers didn't sweep the Mariners. The Brewers did take 2 out of 3 in that series, but the Mariners did win the second game in that series. And then we know that a sweep is just when one team wins all the games in a series. We talk about sweeps all the time here because sweeps and streaks are kind of what I love to keep up with in baseball. And if you're someone like me who loves that kind of statistic, this week in baseball was definitely for you. There were 12 sweeps this past week. Just for reference, the week before there were only 6, and the week before that there were only 4, including the weekday series and the weekend series. So I think that this really shows that teams are getting into their groove. We're really seeing the teams that are making a name for themselves and trying to get into playoff positions or solidify their position in the playoffs. There were some really good games to watch this week, and I can't wait to go through them now. So for the sweeps during the weekday series, the Yankees swept the Orioles. The Kansas City Royals swept the Athletics. The Minnesota Twins swept the Braves. And just as a side note there, the Braves have never been swept this season. That is the first time in 2026 that the Braves have been swept. And the Dodgers swept the Rockies. Then over this past weekend, we actually went into Sunday with 10 teams going for the sweep. So there were 10 sweep situations going into Sunday. And out of those 10, 7 of them actually happened. So we know that there's 15 games every day with baseball. Well, most days there's 15 games. And so 10 out of those 15 games were sweep situations, and 7 of those 10 possible situations actually happened. So for the 7 sweeps, the Phillies swept the St. Louis Cardinals. The Red Sox swept the San Francisco Giants. The Marlins swept the Nationals. The Kansas City Royals swept the Detroit Tigers. The Cleveland Guardians swept the Rockies. The San Diego Padres swept the Minnesota Twins. And the Dodgers swept the Pirates. So you'll kind of recognize that some names were repeated. The Kansas City Royals are currently on a 8-game win streak. The Phillies are on a 9-game win streak. The Dodgers are on a 6-game win streak. And the Guardians are on a 4-game win streak. This week, my sneaky team of the week is the Kansas City Royals. Like I mentioned, they're on a 8-game win streak. And that is the first time they've been on an 8-game win streak since May 2024. So last week I said that the Rockies would be one of the spoiler teams, but I stand corrected for sure, because now I think that the Kansas City Royals are actually the ones that teams should be watching out for. Right now, the Royals are 11 games behind, so they really don't have much of a chance to even be in the wildcard position. But going on an 8-game win streak means you do not want to face the Royals right now, especially if you are a contender for a wild card spot and you'd like to keep that spot. So like I was saying with the Rockies, they could be a team where they kind of mess up the other team's chances of going into the playoffs at all, just because at the end of the season, maybe that team just needed to win 3 more games and they end up getting swept by a team that doesn't even have a chance to go to the playoffs. And now it seems like the Royals are definitely going to be a team to watch out for. So for the remaining schedule for the Kansas City Royals, they're actually going to be facing the Blue Jays, the Guardians, the Marlins. They'll face the Blue Jays again. They'll be going against the Diamondbacks, the Red Sox, the Astros, the Pirates, the White Sox, and the Guardians again. And so we know that the Guardians, the Blue Jays, and the Red Sox are definitely at the top of wildcard positions. Well, maybe not so much the Blue Jays, but definitely the Red Sox and the Guardians are trying to make sure that they stay as wildcard contenders. So the last thing they need is to be swept by the Kansas City Royals, or even lose 2 out of 3 from the Kansas City Royals, because at this point of the season, every single game counts. We are getting super close to September. The end of the season is at the end of September, so there's only so many games left. And right now, teams need to be watching out for the Kansas City Royals. The Royals have won 58 games this season, and they've lost 74, which brings them below 500 at 439. Like I mentioned, they are 11 games behind the Chicago White Sox, so they really are not a contender for the wild card spot. But they've really found their groove at this point of the season, and we'll see how the rest of the season goes for them, and if they really do mess up someone's chances of going into the playoffs. And now for our temperature check, where I talk about the teams that are heating up and cooling down. So starting with the teams that are heating up, the Philadelphia Phillies, like I mentioned, are on a 9-game winning streak right now. So they've won 9 and lost 1 of their past 10 games. They're currently 3 games behind the Atlanta Braves. So they do still have a pretty good chance of even taking the top spot for the National League East. There are still plenty of games left, and with the way that the Braves have been playing lately, the Phillies really do have a chance. So right now in the National League, the Phillies hold the 2nd wildcard spot, right behind the Chicago Cubs. The Phillies have won 73 games this season, and they've only lost 58. So they're above 500 at 557. The other team that's definitely heating up right now are the LA Dodgers. Of course, the Dodgers have been doing well all season, but they've definitely been on a run these past couple of games. They've won 6 games in a row, like I mentioned. And right now they've won 7 and lost 3 of their past 10 games. They are still at the top of their division as they have been this entire season. They are the leaders of the National League West. They've won 80 games this season and lost 51, which brings them way above 500 at 6-11. So the Dodgers and the Brewers are the first teams this season to reach 80 wins. The Brewers are actually at 81 as of this past weekend, and I believe the Dodgers' 80th win was yesterday, so Sunday. Also, on Saturday, Tarik Skubal, who was recently traded to the Dodgers, which is one of the biggest trades of the deadline, he played his first game at home for the Dodgers, and he won his first game as a Dodger. He lost his first start. I don't think that start was at home, but he definitely lost. He lost his first start with the Dodgers, but he redeemed himself this past Saturday. So we love that for Tarik Skubal. And the last team I think is heating up are the Cleveland Guardians. So they have been struggling. They have been on my cooling down list before, but the Guardians are clawing their way back to the top. They are back to being 3.5 games behind the Chicago White Sox right now. Like I mentioned, they're on a 4-game win streak. They've won 6 games and lost 4 in their past 10 games. Overall, this season, they've won 65 games and lost 66. So they're right below 500 at 496. So they're only 1 game below 500. So the Guardians really do have a good chance of possibly winning the division. There's still enough games where being 3.5 games behind is not a significant number. But for right now, the Guardians hold the 3rd wildcard spot. They're actually tied with the Texas Rangers for the 3rd spot because they both have identical records. So the Texas Rangers also have won 65 games and lost 66 and are at 496 for their record this season. And if the season were to end today, the Texas Rangers would actually take that 3rd wildcard spot because of the tiebreaker rule, where the team that won the series ends up winning the tiebreaker. So for this example, the Cleveland Guardians and the Texas Rangers played 6 games against each other this season. So 2 3-game series throughout this season. And out of those, the Texas Rangers won 4 and the Guardians only won 2. So in a tiebreaker situation, the Texas Rangers would take that wildcard spot from the Cleveland Guardians. But the season is not ending today, so we don't even know if that's even going to have to be a possibility. But it is an interesting example of the tiebreaker situation and how it can be used. But moving on to the teams that I think are cooling down. So the Detroit Tigers have been suffering. They've been struggling for quite some time. Currently, they're on a 5-game losing streak. Like I mentioned, they were just swept by the Kansas City Royals, and they lost their series this past week versus the Pittsburgh Pirates. They're currently 7 games behind the Chicago White Sox, so they are unlikely, honestly, to reach the wild card spot at this point. They are only 3.5 games behind the Cleveland Guardians / Texas Rangers for that 3rd wild card spot, but there are other teams that are much closer, like the Toronto Blue Jays are only 1.5 games behind. The Twins and the Orioles are both 2 games behind, and the Seattle Mariners are 3 games behind. So they would also have to jump over a lot of people. They would have to go on a really good winning streak, and the other teams would have to simultaneously go on losing streaks for this to even really be a possibility for the Tigers. So they really are quite unlikely to reach that 3rd wild card spot, unfortunately for them. They've only won 2 games and they've lost 8 games in their past 10. Currently, for the season, they've won 61 games and they've lost 69, so that brings them pretty below 500 at 469. The other team that I think is cooling down right now are the Atlanta Braves. Like I mentioned, they were swept for the very first time this season by the Minnesota Twins during the weekday series. In their past 10 games, they've only won 3 and they've lost 7. They still remain at the top of the National League East. However, like I mentioned, the Phillies are only 3 games behind the Braves and could almost pretty easily take over that top spot if the Braves continue to go through this slump. This past weekend, they lost their series versus the Brewers, but overall this season, the Braves have won 76 games. They've only lost 55, so they're way above 500 at 580. And like I said, they're still at the top of their division, so they are still likely to win the division and still be able to get to the playoffs. So that's what's really interesting about the way that the playoffs are kind of set up. Honestly, I don't know how other sports work, but for baseball, since there's 6 divisions, 3 divisions in each league, it's for a total of 6, like the East, Central, and West divisions. And then you have a winner from each division that automatically is going to go to the playoffs. So it's like, as long as you win your division, it doesn't necessarily matter if your team is worse than the winner of a different division. So the Braves are still pretty much likely to go to the playoffs. And even still, if the Phillies do take that top spot, the next team is the Miami Marlins, who are 9 games behind the Atlanta Braves. So they still have a pretty good shot of at least making a wild card seat. But again, that's something that you would have to really see if the situation came up, as if the Phillies took that spot from the Braves, because then you have to look at a bunch of other factors that will play into the wild card standings and how the Braves will fit into that. But for right now, the Braves are still at the top of the division, and so they still are guaranteed a spot in the playoffs. So like I mentioned, this week was really full of a bunch of sweeps and streaks. What I thought was interesting is that the AL Central and the NL West, so the American League Central and the National League West, they both have the most streaks in their respective leagues. So the AL Central has 2 teams that are on winning streaks and 2 teams that are on losing streaks. So the Cleveland Guardians and the Kansas City Royals are both on winning streaks, and the Minnesota Twins and the Detroit Tigers are both on losing streaks. The Chicago White Sox are not on a streak. They just won last night. They did win their series against the New York Mets this past weekend, and they've won 6 and lost 4 of their past 10 games. But then for the National League West, the LA Dodgers are on a win streak, as well as the San Diego Padres. And then the San Francisco Giants and the Colorado Rockies are both on losing streaks. Meanwhile, the Arizona Diamondbacks are not on a streak. They did win their game yesterday, and they won their series against the Cincinnati Reds this past weekend. But they did lose their series versus the Red Sox earlier in the week. And now for our home run leaderboard update. Really hasn't updated that much. The names are all the same, only the numbers have changed. So Kyle Schwarber, the designated hitter for the Philadelphia Phillies, he's currently at 39 home runs this season, leading all of baseball. And then Yordan Alvarez, the designated hitter for the Houston Astros, he is at 36 home runs and is still the leader for the American League, and is still in the running for a triple crown. Like I explained last week, a triple crown is when the person is leading their league in home runs, RBIs, and batting average. So we'll see if Yordan Alvarez is able to get that triple crown at the end of the season. And then Matt Olson is also at 36. He is the first baseman for the Atlanta Braves. But the Braves, like we remember, are in the National League, so he's not tied with Yordan Alvarez in that respect, only in the all of MLB kind of perspective they're tied, but Yordan Alvarez is still the leader in the American League, while Matt Olson is second in the National League to Kyle Schwarber. And then Junior Caminero is sitting at 35 home runs. He is the third baseman for the Tampa Bay Rays in the American League. And then we have Hunter Goodman, who is the catcher for the Colorado Rockies. He has 34 home runs. Now we're in the point of the season where talking about the wild cards and division leaders is extremely relevant. So I wanted to have a little section where I kind of touch on the division leaders and the wild card spots. So for the American League, the division leaders as of today, in the American League East, it is the Tampa Bay Rays. And the Central, it is the Chicago White Sox. And in the West, it is the Houston Astros. So those three are the division leaders and are basically guaranteed a spot in the playoffs. For the American League wildcards, the first wildcard spot goes to the New York Yankees, followed by the Boston Red Sox, and then the Cleveland Guardians, with the caveat that I mentioned earlier being that the Guardians are tied with the Texas Rangers as of right now, and Texas would win that tiebreaker. And then for the National League, the division leaders are the Milwaukee Brewers in the Central. In the West, it is the LA Dodgers. And in the East, it is the Atlanta Braves. And for the wildcard positions, the Chicago Cubs are the top wildcard spot, and they are followed by the Philadelphia Phillies and then the San Diego Padres. A close second is the Arizona Diamondbacks, who are currently preying on the downfall of the San Diego Padres because they are only 2 games behind the Padres, and if they can overtake them, they will be able to take that third wildcard spot. And for the games that I'm excited to watch for this week, the Dodgers are going to be playing the Braves. So the Dodgers are at the top of the NL West and the Braves are at the top of NL East. So that should be a really interesting game to watch. Like I mentioned, the Dodgers are definitely heating up currently on a 6-game winning streak, while the Braves have been definitely struggling as of late. It'll be a fun game to watch, I think, because they're still both really good teams that know how to play baseball really well. So it'll definitely be a fun series to watch. And then over the weekend, the Red Sox are playing the New York Yankees. So this is a interdivision series. They are both in the AL East. They both have very similar records, where the New York Yankees have won 74 games this season and lost 56. So they're above 500 at 569. Meanwhile, the Red Sox have won 71 games and lost 59, so they're also above 500 at 546. The Red Sox, however, are currently on a 3-game win streak. Of course, this is a weekend series, so they most likely will not still be on that win streak. I mean, who knows, honestly, but it'll be interesting to see how the standings change by the time the week is over. The Yankees are in the first wildcard spot and the Red Sox are in the second. So it probably won't influence the wildcard too much, but it'll still be a fun game to watch. And now for my softer take this week. Baseball really shows us that there are a lot of ups and downs in life, and we can have periods where we are constantly winning, constantly doing really well, and kind of racing to get to the finish line and trying to finish strong in whatever goals that we are trying to reach. And even though there are also times where you're trying to reach your goal and you end up in a slump and you're kind of struggling to get to the end, Just knowing that the end is near is always helpful, but then still trying to end strong, even in the face of adversity, like being on a 5-game losing streak, and just trying to remind yourself to not give up and waking up the next day and starting over and trying again, because that is what baseball is all about. It is definitely a sport of constant redemption, radical self-forgiveness, and acceptance. And so that's really what baseball is trying to teach us in our everyday lives. So that's all that I have for you guys today. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you did, feel free to share it with someone else who you think might like it and enjoy it. Thank you for joining me in the softest corner of sports media, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye! Oh my gosh, wait. Hey babes, thank you for tuning in for another episode of Baseball for Girls. I probably forgot to plug the things that I'm doing, including my Instagram, so I just wanted to come back here and plug all my little things really quick. So my Instagram is baseball4girls_, and I just kind of post on there whenever I upload a new episode. I also have a baseball score tracker. It has about 40 weeks in it, and it has like some notes, sections, so that you can also keep track of games throughout the week. I use it for Major League Baseball games, but you can also use it for minor league games, your kids' games, your friends that are playing baseball, whatever. It's really just a nice way to keep track of all the games and the scores from each game, especially since baseball is typically played in series. So you should check that out. It's just called Baseball Score Log, and it can be found on Amazon, and it's only $9.99. I also include how I personally keep track of games as a little bit of an instruction guide on the first couple of pages, so you can keep score like the same way that I do. Also, I am in the process of writing a ebook. So it'll be a Baseball for Beginners ebook that I have been working on for the past couple of weeks. It'll just kind of walk through the rules of the game, how to watch it for the first time, and just give you a general idea for how to understand baseball from a very, very basic perspective. So I'll definitely let y'all know whenever that is available. Thanks again for tuning in, and I'll catch y'all next time. Bye.